Hello and welcome back to Daring and Doing. I'm all Hester and I'm joined by the brilliant Ben Bowman. How you doing, mate?
Good, thanks, mate. I'm good, thank you. Easter weekend, Spurs, fucking won. Spurs, honestly, Tottenham, going to Spurs when it's sunny like that on the Saturdays, like there's no better place to be. It was just glorious. White Hart Lane, bathed in sunshine, 3 points. It's no better place to be. It was difficult, but we got it done. But no, perfect way to kick off the weekend. It was actually a pretty good weekend for Spurs in terms of the other results as well. So, other than Villa winning, obviously, but a bit of a gap towards United now. So, feeling a little bit more comfortable about everything after Fulham.
Yeah. You've had a busy weekend as well. You've had a few things on for yourself. How was it first night staying in your new house?
It was a bit weird actually, but it was quite good. It was good. I enjoyed it. I came back home at like about a few hours ago, or like an hour ago, just to do this because we still haven't got internet. So it's just like I'll still be coming back to mum and dad to be like, can I watch the football, please? Because we still haven't got our internet set up. So West Ham tomorrow, I'll be back here. But no, it was good, mate. It's been a busy few days, but all good stuff.
Yeah, I want to apologise in advance. I have no idea how I'm going to be in the next hour or so because all the shit I ate in the last 24 hours has come back to haunt me. Because I was at 4 households yesterday, and every single time I had a free course meal. By the end of it, I couldn't be touched. I couldn't no one could come near me. I was genuinely feeling like I was going to be sick. And then today, I feel like I've been hit by a bus. Genuinely, I feel like hit by a bus. But it was a good Easter. And it was a really good weekend for Spurs, scraping past Luton, getting those important 3 points. The thing about Spurs is that we always seem to make it difficult for ourselves in some way or another. There's always that squeaky bum time when actually it should be quite a straightforward result at home to Luton. Luton actually made it really difficult for us. But I mean, we both predicted quite a high scoreline, didn't we? But 2-1, we scraped past them.
You went 5-1.
I know, I got way too excited. I don't know. I mean, actually, in hindsight, it could have been 5-1. But
definitely.
But we just didn't take that Johnson chance as well. That was an ant's cock away from being 3-1. So I mean, it's like I was close, but not really at all. It was 2-1. But how would you sum up that game? How would you sum up the game? Because Luton did make it difficult for us.
Yeah, if there was one word to sum up that game, it would probably just be Tottenham. Like it's just what we do. It's just literally just what we do. It was like go behind 1-0 down early on, and then fight to get back in the game, and we did it. We made it more difficult than it needed to be. But again, it was kind of like luck wasn't quite on our side with a couple of those chances. The one that Sonny hit both posts with, and then Johnson. I mean, from where I looked, that was in. But from where I was sitting, that looked in. And I'm still looking at it now, thinking, how the fuck did that not go over the line? That's got to be the closest one they've had. We've had a few of them. Do you remember the Lamella one at Watford a few years ago? Yeah, it was just before COVID. We had one. It was like last kick of the game.
Yeah,
it was just like we've had a fair few of them. So, but no, we deserve to win. We did definitely deserve to win the game. We created more than enough chances. I think the thing is, at half time, there was obviously a lot of kind of negativity floating about. I wasn't angry. I was just more frustrated because it wasn't actually like Luton were making it that difficult for us. But it did feel like it's one of those things where if we up it by 5-10%, then I think we get back in this quite quickly and then go on to win like we have seen in the second halves of the few games before against like Brentford and Crystal Palace at home. It just needed that kind of little bit of an injection of tempo. But yeah, it wasn't as if Luton was sitting in that low block, really kind of frustrating us. I heard a couple of Luton fans. I was on the train back home after the game on Saturday, and there was some Luton fans on there, and they were saying that like once Spurs worked out that they could just run through us rather than trying to pass in front of us, they kind of it made it quite easy because they were leaving gaps and were leaving space. So I think they were aware of what was going to happen, and I think that they as soon as we kind of made those changes at half time, obviously with Johnson coming on, and then a couple of the changes in the second half, everything just increased that little bit extra that we needed to win the game. And I thought it was a pretty decent performance, really. I think if you kind of take away the fact that it was Luton, it was a game that Spurs dominated for the most part, went behind early, but created more than enough chances to go on and win it quite comfortably. But just because it was 2-1 and it was in the last minute, there's this feeling that it was kind of we scraped by. But I thought it was a good performance, to be fair.
Yeah, it's always just because we've seen it so much this season. It's always worrying when a team that you know is going to set up quite a deep block, it scores like it's quite early on in the game. It's always worrying because it just gives you flashbacks to Wolves. It gives you flashbacks to well, there's loads of games this season where we've just made it so difficult for ourselves, and sometimes we haven't got over the line. But this game, it did feel like we were going to turn it around, and we just upped that
Yeah.
gear. I think Ange's in-game substitutions were unbelievable. We'll get into Brennan Johnson, but he realised what the issues were, and he made that change, and Johnson was the catalyst. But we'll get into it, and obviously Lo Celso as well, Bentancur. But yeah, it wasn't something that it was frustrating the way we went 1-0 down again on a transition. I mean, how many times have we seen that this season where a team just capitalises on us being a bit lackluster in defence, a bit too passive, a bit too casual. Obviously, it was a wayward pass from Kulusevski in, and Son loses the ball. I think Son could, not to be like digging out our players, but I think it was definitely a goal that was it could have been avoided. Son lost the ball quite easily. Bissouma was just way too. It's way too casual.
Just late.
Lazy.
Yeah.
He just swung a foot at it. Townsend, an experienced Premier League player. I mean, we'd know it. We saw it all the time at White Hart Lane with the way he'd go down that wing. He just a step over loses him just like that. It shouldn't be that easy. And then whips it in. Again, I don't want to go into the team, but yeah, Dragusin probably could have done a bit better, getting a bit tighter to Barkley, and then Morris did well checking Porro. And then
did really well.
Capitalises. So that was frustrating because that was a very avoidable goal. But yeah, 1-0 down, and then we didn't really look too suspect or too vulnerable after that. And we just carried on playing our game, and it did feel like we were always going to win that game, turn it around. There was a couple of chances actually that they had that were a bit half chances where, again, we weren't intense enough in closing crosses down. I can't remember. I think it might have been the 43rd minute. I can't remember who hit it on the edge of the box. But again, we just let a cross come in. I don't know who it was. It might have been Bissouma, just letting a cross come in, not getting close to the player. So there's definitely areas that we could take away from this game and improve on. But these are problems that have been occurring all season with our sort of, our lack of intensity in defending transitions, in defending crosses. But I mean, apart from that, I think it was a really solid performance. And I know it was Luton, but Luton were always going to give us a game. They're fighting for their lives. Why do you think why do you think we always struggle to sort of come out straight away and play well in the first half? It always seems like we wait, we're patient until the second half, and then we just turn it up a few gears and come away with a win, or maybe we don't because we didn't do enough in the first half. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's really odd because the kind of when Ange first came in, this has kind of been a theme throughout most of the season. Like, I think towards the start there were games that we were controlling it from the off and just kind of things not going our way, or we were going 1-0 up. And you think of like the first half against Newcastle, for example, towards Christmas, where we completely obliterated them in that first half, and then that intensity and that tempo continued. So it's a bit of an odd one because the way I kind of understood it in terms of the way that a lot of people were talking about Ange and how he'd like to implement his tactics, were that there would be that real intensity for the first 50, 60 minutes to try and essentially go as far in front as you can, because then you can relax and sit back a little bit. But since the turn of the year, we've kind of seen the opposite.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just been in terms of the teams that we've come up against wanting to frustrate us, wanting to sit in with that low block. Obviously, Ange's the way he wants to play will get figured out over time. I'm not saying that he's been found out, but teams will become wiser to the way Tottenham want to play over the course of the season. You have to kind of wait and see how Spurs are going to play, and I think teams have kind of looked at that. There's enough of a sample size now of Tottenham games for teams to sort of look and think, right, this is how we want to set up against it. But that was what was weird about Saturday, was just that I don't think that was the case. I think it was just the fact that we were quite wasteful in front of goal, or just quite unlucky at some points. And yes, it's more about the optics of going 1-0 down at home to Luton, who are fighting for their lives. I think that's why people were a little bit frustrated, rather than how we actually played. And I think sometimes the context of who you're playing and the fact that it was only 2-1 and you perceivably scraped past actually kind of gets in the way of what you see when watching the game. Because I think if you're not watching Tottenham, if you're watching any other team, you're probably thinking, well, they're going to come back and win this. Like, you know, they've gone 1-0 down, but it's one of those things where they're creating enough chances. They've just hit both posts, and Werner's just missed a good chance, and Sarr's had one smashed off the line. So it's one of them for me. But it is a strange one because it's becoming a little bit of a theme. And like I said, I think at half time, I think we played with more intensity than we had played in actually some of the few home games previously, like Brentford and Crystal Palace, for example. But it was just more a frustration because I think we weren't necessarily capitalising on the opportunities or finding the right way to go through them, because there were gaps left by Luton. So it's a strange one, really, and something I can't really put my finger on why we're perceivedly starting these games slower. But I didn't think it was one of those ones on Saturday. I think it was more just the fact that we went 1-0 down, so it goes along with the kind of that script, if you like.
Yeah, I get you. One thing is for sure that we come out at half time upping up that gear, and I don't know if you saw this in the game. Of course, you're obviously at the game, but on TV there was a moment where as soon as that half time whistle went, and shouted to the bench and just pointed behind him and almost being like, "You're on now." And the player that was removed from the starting 11 was changed, sacrificed, was Kulusevski. My question to you is, do we have a Kulusevski dilemma? Because we were told at the beginning of Ange's era at Spurs that Kulusevski isn't an Ange winger. He's someone that you almost might miss out in this process, in this project, because he's not that typical Ange winger. But he has proven to be such an integral player off the ball, in the way we press, in the way that we play, the intensity. And my problem with him is that we just lose that sort of dynamic in attack that Brennan Johnson showed on the right hand side with him, because he is he's quite predictable in the way that he'll keep coming on his left, and the problem with him, I think, again, I'm not trying to single him out or have any agenda against him. I love Kulusevski, and I've spoken about Kulusevski so many times in like bundles of praise, but the problem with him is that he doesn't really know when to shoot or pass. I think he gets caught in two minds, and it's almost like he really wants an assist, but he really wants to go at the same time, and he'll always make the wrong decision in the moment. But there were some areas, like some elements of his game against Luton that were good. He set away Werner in a through ball that was really, really good. But again, he come inside there, showing that maybe glimpse of how he wants to be that attacking eight. And what do you think? Do we have a Kulusevski dilemma? Because I actually think he needs to be played centrally. I don't think he's a player out on the wing for Postecoglou, but he might just be in bad form. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really tricky because it's one of these players where there's always a scapegoat at Tottenham, isn't there? And usually sometimes it's easier to go along with it because quite often it's a player that isn't seen as important to Spurs. They maybe come in and play the odd game, and maybe like an Emerson Royale in the past, who wasn't necessarily a guaranteed starter, who would then get scapegoated off the back of a few poor performances. And I'm not saying Kulusevski is necessarily being scapegoated or is definitely not exempt from criticism, because he hasn't been at the level over the last few games. But like you say, it's very difficult to come and kind of be, kind of sort of sit and slag him off, because he's so important to us. And I love Kulusevski. I think when he's at his best, he's one of the most unique winger profiles in Europe. The fact that he likes to drift centrally and really affect the game in those areas, he can do that like not many other wingers can. I think the problem is there was such a night and day change in terms of how Brennan Johnson was able to impact the way that Spurs played, not necessarily just also his own individual performance, the impact that he had on the team, which is something that, we always praise Kulusevski for, his selfless, off the ball work, his, the fact that, like you said, he kind of gets caught in two minds sometimes where he wants to have a shot or lay it off to someone else. He's quite a selfless player, and his movement does that as well, and the ways they're able to carry the ball up the pitch for Spurs, all these things. But sometimes when you need that threat, Johnson is just that bit more direct, and his off the ball movement in terms of getting into the right spaces was exactly what Tottenham needed in that game, that quick exchange of passing, which Kulusevski just doesn't. He's not got the ability with the goal, with the own goal, the equaliser. Kulusevski just hasn't got that same burst of pace to be able to get into that space where Porro laid the ball into, because it's those fine margins that change those games, especially when you're getting frustrated against a team that wants to make it difficult for you. It's those off-the-cuff moments where teams, no matter how deep you sit, can do anything about it. And sometimes Kulusevski needs the game to be a little bit more open for him to be able to affect it, certainly from a wide position, not so much centrally, because we've seen how he playing in that, that Maddison position in that run of games where we didn't have James Maddison, how he was able to dictate the game against a team that wanted to come onto us and against teams that wanted to sit deeper and make it difficult. So it's a really tricky one, and I think there is a little bit of a dilemma. I also think we should celebrate the fact that we have excellent squad depth in those positions, two players that can really affect the game in different ways, and I hope that it is just a run of bad form. Kulusevski's obviously spoken about the fact that he wants to play centrally. He does want to play there. He kind of wants to play in that, Mazzala position, like if you play a lot of Football Manager, that kind of half winger role, that winger that sort of wants to come inside a little bit like what we used to see Eriksen do for Spurs. When we played that kind of 4-2-3-1, it was never usually Eriksen in the 10. It was always Dele, and Eriksen would kind of play on the right hand side, but then drift into the central areas a lot more, and the width would then come from the fullbacks. And where we play with those inverted fullbacks, sometimes Kulusevski creates a little bit of a roadblock because there's not the space for Porro to go into down that side and Sarr to run in that channel as well, and things can become a little bit congested because that's the area that he likes to play in. I think as well, one of those things that's quite frustrating in terms of his right foot, because we've seen him do it for Sweden, putting a great cross to set up their goal in their game last week from again, it was not from the wing, it was from that inside kind of half space. I felt sorry for him really, because I thought he had a poor first half, but it wasn't poor to the point where I was like, well, get him off. It wasn't that. It wasn't that level. But when he did make the change, straight away, it made an impact on the game. And sometimes that's what happens when you've got a squad of players that you love. It's harder to kind of accept these things sometimes because we all want to see him on the pitch, and we've got so much quality in those areas. And Kulusevski, we know how important he is for us, but I think you just have to accept that that's what it is when you want to be at the top level. And just got that kind of ruthless, cutthroat approach where it's like, if you're not doing it, I need you now. I need someone else to come on and do it for you if you can't make an impact on the game. That chance that set away the goal, it was a catalogue of errors that kind of continued after that, but it is a poor pass from Kulu.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that killed the momentum of the attack completely. And then they go up the other end and score. He just doesn't open up his body quite enough to create the right angle for the pass. I really hope it's just a poor run of form from him, because he's so important. But I think it's something to keep an eye on throughout the rest of the season. But it is good to know that we've got, especially with how injury prone James Maddison can be, and the fact that he's already spent about 3 months out for us already, to have someone who's sitting there waiting, eager to play in that position.
Yeah.
Also the fact that we know we can change the game to play him and Johnson as well, to bring Kulu inside into that number 8 position where he has played, that kind of Mazzala half winger, central midfielder role. Like, he's played in there and thrived in there this season. That's exactly what he did against Brentford. Johnson off the bench at half time, Kulu in midfield, away you go. And the fact that he took Sarr off as well, I thought maybe he could have kept Kulu on and played him in that position, but actually then the midfield changes really impacted the game as well as Johnson. So it's a tough one. It's a really tough one. But I just think we've got to. I think there's a willingness sometimes with Spurs fans to kind of. Someone tweeted this out, and it was just so perfect about just focusing on the bad performances, and kind of wanting to make these. Josh tweeted out saying our fans are genuinely obsessed with players who were shit for us. Literally, only ever want to dig players out, rather than kind of. I thought there was more chat about Kulusevski rather than what Johnson did. And maybe Werner as well, because I thought Werner had a really good impact on the game. I thought Werner was great. I really thought he was good. But again, because he misses the chance, he kind of suffers from the same thing maybe as Kulusevski in that aspect. But I think there was a little bit of a dilemma there. I don't think it's a huge problem because we've got the quality to come on and replace him, but it's something that we need to watch carefully over. But it's good to have the options. I think that's what we've got to be grateful for. So for so long, Spurs fans have complained about the lack of squad depth, and now we've got players who can go and make an impact. All of a sudden, it's a problem. So, yeah, we shall see.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get on to Brennan Johnson, but the change did, I think, also benefit Porro, because Kulusevski wasn't holding that width, and Brennan Johnson was holding that width, making quick 1-2s, and his movement of the ball just really benefited Porro. But with Kulusevski, it's with his versatility, you can almost turn that Kulusevski dilemma, conundrum, into something beautiful, like you see with Bernardo Silva. He's such a versatile player. I know we keep comparing him with Bernardo Silva, but you can see him playing centrally. You can see him playing even deeper centrally. You can see him playing on that right whenever we need when we need him in Champions League games, let's say, in Europe, when we need to give players rest. He will be such a handy player to have for this project. It's just he's getting a lot of stick at the moment, so maybe he just needs a little bit of time on the bench, maybe just to sort his mindset out and get that mentality back to that confidence that he was having when we know he's at his best, and because we know he could be so much better. But I don't think it's a massive issue because we have such an incredible prospect with Kulusevski that he can play in he can cover so many positions, and you don't. I don't think you look at City and think, oh, they've got a dilemma because Bernardo Silva, or who do they have? Grealish, for example. Have they got a dilemma?
Foden as well.
Yeah, no, they have unbelievable squad depth and they have different players that can change the dynamic. And we saw that with Johnson and Kulusevski. The difference in Johnson's performance and Kulusevski's because they both bring something different to the table. They both have something different to offer. And yeah, I think it might be. We're going to talk about Brennan Johnson, but it actually might be an overpower. It might be a cheat code to have Brennan Johnson come on at half times or come on in the second half and be that catalyst like he was against Brentford, like he was against Luton, and Palace, because they just offer so much. They just offer different things to each other, and it's perfect balance. And that left back, whoever's marking both of them, is going to have a big issue because they're not going to know what to do. Their whole game plan changes. So it's something beautiful. I don't think it's a dilemma. I think Kulusevski's just in a bad spell of form. My worry is that we're looking at players like, and again, we've talked about this before. We're looking at players like Eze. We're looking at players like Goodmanson. We're looking at players. I mean, people are talking about Jack Grealish maybe coming to Spurs, and which would be unbelievable. But my issue is, where does Kulusevski fit into that? Because he is that sort of Mazzala position that he's an inverted winger, and that's his favourite sort of position. He loves to come inside, where in this system you need to hold width. So my issue is, what happens to Kulusevski if we go and sign an Eze or a Goodmanson? Because we have this squad depth. Do we want to make it an issue and sign a player that sort of carries the same dynamics as Kulusevski? Probably not, but it looks like we might be doing that. So that's my only worry. But at the moment, I'm happy with it because Kulusevski, I know he's in bad form, but that balance between switching it up between Johnson and Kulusevski is vital at the moment.
Also, right, if you think about, just quickly before you move on, you think about the fact that, and I know we're going to come on and talk about the midfield changes and Lo Celso's impact on the game, but James Maddison came off at around 65 minutes in that game. 65, around that time, was it, I think? It felt like it was quite soon into the game. It was just after we got the equaliser, I think. And the fact that if you've got Kulusevski on the bench because he wants to start Johnson on Tuesday, for example, the fact that he's prepared to take Maddison off if he's not having the same amount of influence on the game shows that you've got an incredible option to come off the bench in Kulusevski and play in that central role, because he sees it as his best role. He will want to come on and make an impact and show what he can do in replace of James Maddison. So, like you said, it's one of those things that can feel like a headache, especially with like you said, I think it's important to touch on what Spurs want to do in the summer as well. But I think we should just embrace it a little bit and kind of talk about the fact that we've got so many options. But I think just it's an interesting point about Maddison as well. Because there's options there to kind of change it up. And it just shows with Ange, it's not about, we might think that, like on the surface of it, James Maddison, for example, a lot of people will see him as one of Spurs' best players, and he has been one of Spurs' best players this season. He's been an incredible signing, don't get me wrong, but these players aren't exempt from, it's not like, when Harry Kane was maybe having a rare poor game for Tottenham, it's like, we're not going to take him off. Like Son, you're not going to take him off, are you?
Yeah.
But we've seen he will take Son off. He will take Maddison off. He will take Kulusevski off. He will take these players off who aren't necessarily impacting the game in the way he wants them to. So I think that almost benefits us as well, because he wants to give everyone a fair crack of the whip.
Yeah, no, 100% I agree. It's a good problem to have. People will look at it like a problem to get rid of and get rid of Kulusevski. He's not good enough. No, it's an amazing problem to have because there's so much depth there and so many different possibilities that we could use both Kulusevski and Johnson. Let's get on to Brennan Johnson then, because he was unbelievable coming off the bench.
My boy.
And he's so lovable, isn't he? He's so lovable. He's so coy, and fair play to him because he's had so much stick this season, so much shit. It's not his fault that he costs so much money. But we're starting to see glimpses of how good Brennan Johnson can be. And did we get a glimpse into how integral Brennan Johnson can be in this system? Did we get that glimpse against Luton?
I think we've been seeing glimpses for months now. I do, because I think someone put a great tweet out, which I used in a TikTok video I did about it yesterday, in terms of his ability to penetrate those kind of spaces in that inside channel. He dovetails with Porro so well. And like you said, his ability to kind of unlock Porro in that game was fantastic. Porro was pretty poor, I thought, in the first half in terms of his play in possession, his kind of inability to impact the game. And I think, again, I think he was maybe a bit unlucky with that sort of roadblock almost that Kulusevski kind of creates sometimes in the spaces that Porro wants to get into. But Johnson and Porro just looked like they had that natural relationship. And there's been 4 goals off the top of my head, and it was in this tweet, and I used it in a video that I made, of Johnson getting into exactly the same space and exactly the same outcome as that we saw for the equalising goal. That little quick interchange with Porro, and he's away, he's darted into the space. I think that goal, for me, perfectly summed up what Johnson is as a player, because there would have been frustration when he receives the ball in a lot of time and space. Naturally, as a football fan, because you want to see that excitement, you 1-0 down, you want to say, right, run at the fullback, go at him, take him on, go to the touchline. But he doesn't. He slows it down, draws the defender into him. He's got Porro coming up with him, little give and go, and Johnson's ability to dart into that space and then provide such a dangerous cross across the box. Because if the fullback wasn't there, Werner would have scored. It would have been a goal. You just know that you're going to cause so many problems like that. We used to have that with Walker and Rose, those balls that they were able to put into the box, whipped low balls across the centre of the penalty area. Eriksen used to do that a lot from out wide, and we've got that player now that's got the ability. His sensing of the spaces that he needs to run into is excellent, Johnson.
Yeah.
I think that goal, like I said, summed up for me that I think a lot of Spurs fans kind of misprofiled him, and that's why they were getting frustrated with him, because they wanted him to be this winger that was going to take people on, which we saw actually over the last few games he is a little bit more comfortable doing. For example, with Matty Cash at Villa, but he still wants to come inside onto that right foot where he feels a little bit more comfortable. He knows when to slow it down, and he knows when to use his pace to attack the space, and that's exactly what he's been doing all season for Tottenham, making those impacts in games. Bournemouth at home, albeit it had a little bit more space in that example. Everton at home for Richarlison, that swept ball across the box that allows Richarlison to then sweep it into the goal. For both of those ones. Crystal Palace at home, again, attacking that same space. That came from his industry, to be fair, wanting to win the ball back, not necessarily attacking the space. But there's been countless examples of when he's got into those positions and really made an impact for Spurs. And the fact that he came on and made an impact so quickly then just gives him that... You can tell he's a bit of a confidence player, Johnson.
100%, yeah.
Gives him that confidence for the rest of the game, because then he was such a dangerous outlet. The amount of times that he got into that position and cut the ball back, and it was just not quite there for a Spurs player. There wasn't someone in the box. He was just such a constant threat throughout that second half. Gets the assist for the second goal as well, which is such an underrated little touch into Sonny. He uses his body so well there, Johnson, to back into the defender and just perfectly lay it off for Sonny to sweep it in. I mean, should have had a goal as well to his name. How that didn't go in, I don't know. He's had a lot of them, Johnson, where like right in front of the goal where he's just not scored. And it's just like, he's good at sweeping into the back post to come in and be that final touch. But when he gets into the central positions, there was one against Palace actually when he first came on that he somehow put over the bar. And there was I think there was one against Fulham as well where he probably should have scored. And it was like, in those little positions right in front of the goal, he's almost not as comfortable. But when he's coming in from that right-hand side and sensing the danger at the back post, he's going to score. But he was very unlucky. On another day, that goes in, so then he's got a goal to his name. But he was just such a... Yeah, he's such an important part of what we want to be, and that kind of... those options, and that he added that dynamism to our attack, but not necessarily just through what he did, but with the way he was able to unlock Pedro Porro, as you said as well. He was such a threat in that second half. He was unbelievable as well, Porro. And that when you've got a player like Johnson who can come on and make an impact like that, you just feel like you're going to go and win the game. We fought against Palace when he did that, came on, assist straight away, then set up another goal for Sonny as well. He's got the most amount of impact, most amount of goals and assists of any substitute in the Premier League this season. And over half of his goals and assists have all come from the bench. So he is making that impact. I remember we spoke after the Palace game, looking forward to Aston Villa about, should we start him? Does he deserve that chance to start? He definitely deserves it, but almost, is this role better for him? Is this role coming off the bench better for him? He then came and started against Villa and then made an impact. from the start as well. So I would probably like to see him get given a go on Tuesday against West Ham. Because I think, again, with that low block that they might want to sit in, I think having Johnson, who's able to create those off-the-cuff moments and getting behind and put those crosses in the box, will be quite vital for us. But yeah, I thought he was excellent and fully deserving of the flowers that he has been getting, Johnson.
Yeah,
and we need
100%.
to stop talking about the price tag as well, because it's just like people just like, is he worth 50 million? It's like, he will be worth 50 million in a few years. You've got to realise these things are an investment. Johnson is a young player, an investment, and it's like the fact that he's already doing this for us now. I think he's got third most amount of goal contributions for Spurs in the Premier League behind Sonny and Richarlison. So he's affecting games like in a big, big way.
Yeah. I think he's really unfortunate that he keeps getting compared to Gareth Bale as well, which is like, who wants to be compared?
Yeah,
I mean, you don't want to get compared to Gareth Bale, but one, he's not really like Gareth Bale. There's certain facets to his game that remind you of Gareth Bale, especially like a young Bale, where he's quick, he's powerful, but he just lacks that sort of that sharpness that Bale had at the beginning of his Spurs like career. So there are some comparisons to be made there, but it's unfair on him. Like, just because he's Welsh, but Welsh fans do it as well. I see it a lot where they almost think he's that person to look to going forward. Instead of Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale is probably the greatest British player of all time.
Yeah,
so it's going to be
they're
so
waiting
hard
for that Bale replacement, aren't they?
Exactly.
I think it's because they're waiting for that. They're desperate to have that kind of someone who's going to take the game by the scruff of the neck. I mean, the way Bale put that country on his back, I don't think anyone will ever be able to achieve that for Wales. It's going to, there's a reason these players come along every 50, 60 years. You know what I mean? So it's,
exactly.
We don't want to put that much pressure on Johnson, but, he has got that sort of same thing that I think the thing that Bale always had, even when he was younger and before he kind of, I think of that 09-10 season where he kind of really first came into his own and was impacting the games towards the end of the season that got us into the Champions League, and all of a sudden his form turned upside down. He had that ability to knock it. I'm going to knock it past you and I'm just going to chase after it.
Yeah.
Johnson hasn't really got that, or he doesn't want to do that. And I think as well, this is what I was kind of saying earlier about our fans kind of misprofiling him a little bit in that aspect, because that's why those comparisons are going to wear heavy on someone's shoulders, and we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But he's not that player. He's not going to, even though he's probably got the pace to do it, he's not going to knock it past you and then just run round you. You don't see many wingers do that in the modern game anyway.
No, yeah. I agree, and it's unfair on him to have that weight on his shoulders of, am I the Bale? Am I the next Bale? Because that's almost impossible. Bale's ridiculous, but he has so much potential, and you can see the player he's sort of become, like he's moulding into, Well, we compared him to Raheem Sterling. We were saying in that special edition of Daring and Doing with Seb, we were saying how he almost can be that Sterling for City when they were Centurions, when he was so good at getting to the back post, his movement, his instinct, because there's a similarity there between with Brennan Johnson. You kind of don't want him to be on the ball for too long. Like, you want him, his best facets is his movements, his instincts, and his attacking positioning. Because he is quite a smart player off the ball, and and that's when you're going to see the best of him. And I do think we were saying when we signed that 1v1 specialist on the other wing, that's when you probably see the best of Brennan Johnson, because it will open up space for him to attack into the box. But he was signed as a transitional player. I think that's what was quite confusing for Spurs fans, and almost quite hard to sort of digest why we signed him for so much money, because we in our heads we needed that typical Ange prototype winger that beats a man 1v1 specialist and drags players towards him. Brennan Johnson isn't that. So when we signed him and we knew we were going to be playing possession-based football, we were all like, isn't he quite a counter-attacking player? Like, he would be perfect in a Conte system, ironically, because he's so good at getting in behind, his movement so good, his pace in transition. But there's so many elements of his game that you could see the potential there. Again, his movement, his instinct, and his delivery is a joke, and it will only get better. And even both feet, you saw it against Man City away, where he whipped it in. He beat Carl Walker with pace and whipped it in with his left foot, and you're thinking, oh my God. And then Kulusevski headed it in off his shoulder. But he's becoming a player that we haven't really seen from Brennan Johnson, but we're utilising him how we did against Luton in the perfect way you need to utilise Brennan Johnson.
Absolutely.
And I think he's almost a bit of a throwback to a throwback winger. He's not someone that wants to have the ball, I don't think. And it's when he simplifies his game, he is starting to do that. He will be a cheat code because it's almost, you know how things go full circle. Defenders are going to expect a winger to try and take you on. Brennan Johnson's going to find that pass and just beat you for pace, and that's going to be so hard to set up against. And yeah, when he simplifies his game, he'll be so effective. And you saw that for the own goal, for the equaliser. It was just a pass and move. That's stuff that kids do, but it was so effective. That's what you teach like youth players. Yeah, it's simple. And that's the thing. He's so effective at those simple things. So yeah, pass to Borrow straight away on his bike in the perfect position, gets it, whips it across, and it's 1-1. And you're thinking, oh my god, that's something that Kulusevski didn't do, and that's something we hadn't had in the first half. That intensity, and his movement in the box. He was so unlucky with that chance that rolled across the line, because that's the prototype Brennan Johnson goal, as you've been saying before. So I think that's definitely that's how we're going to be using Brennan Johnson. He really showed how he will be used in this system. A player that
I just want to touch on two players quickly. Sorry, I was just going to say off the back of that, just before we move on, I just wanted to touch on two players off the back of that, because actually, when you were talking about having that 1v1 winger on the other side, I actually think Werner is the perfect winger to complement Johnson on the other side at the moment in terms of what we've got. And I thought that when you mentioned about having Johnson as a perfect player for that Conte system, almost, it made me think of Harry Kane and made me think of, could you imagine Kane sort of dropping in deeper and playing those balls around the corner to Johnson in behind, running into that space? It'd be a nightmare for defences. But I thought not just with his goal and the fact that he kind of, broke records on Saturday. We're going fifth in our all-time goal scoring list. I thought Sonny was excellent on Saturday.
Yeah, he was
playing that number 9 sort of hold-up striker, bringing other players into play. And I think you saw that when Sonny's got the pace. I think there's been a lot of chat about who's better up front for Spurs, Richarlison or Son. And again, it's a bit like Kulusevski and Johnson. It's good that we've got the options. Yeah. But I think when Sonny's got Werner and Johnson who can go beyond him and use that pace, we saw Sonny against Crystal Palace where Werner missed that chance. We went round the goalkeeper, the way he picked out that quality pass. There was so many times where Sonny did it on Saturday, little clever layoffs, little clever balls around the corner. And when he's got that pace on either side of him to go in behind, then Spurs can be so threatening on that transition as well. And I actually thought Werner was really good on Saturday. I thought what he does is he does hold that width down that left-hand side. He gets his head down, he runs, he commits players. Sometimes there might not be someone there for the cutback in the box, but I think he's that kind of constant threat that actually supplements Johnson a little bit on the other side. He made 3 key passes. He entered into the box 9 times. He progressed the ball really, really well. He wins the ball back. He's a constant threat going down that left channel. I thought he was really, really good. And I think actually that front 3 of Werner, Son and Johnson has quite a nice balance to it.
Yeah, I totally agree, mate. And what's so telling about Werner is that he played 90 minutes and he started, and you can tell Postecoglou loves him because he's such a handful for defenders. He gets the ball and he's running at you straight away. And that I know
doesn't
he's
seem
not
to tire either, Werner.
Yeah, exactly. And I know he's not a 1v1 specialist. I know people get frustrated with his end product, but he is the closest thing to almost a 1v1 specialist in the way that he doesn't allow a fullback to set. He'll straight away be running at fullback with the ball and trying to do something. And I actually think we will sign him. I do think we're going to sign him. It's the total antithesis of the Danjuma loan last year, because Conte didn't use Danjuma at all. But here we're seeing a loan move, a smart move that seemed temporary, that we're actually getting the full value out of. We've got that buy option, just like we did with Danjuma, but Postecoglou is using him as a main starter in this team. So I think it's so telling, and I do think we're going to sign him because he just adds that another dynamic that and balance to that front line. And he can be effective when we do have that 1v1 specialist to probably come on and be a catalyst in his own sense next year, or start in games and have that 1v1 specialist maybe on the right. I've sort of done a U-turn on Timo Werner because I think he can be so effective for in our attack, and I think we will sign him, and I'll be happy with that, to be honest. 15 mil, you don't really get players that quality for 15 mil. Another player that come on and increase the midfield's tempo, as you said in your TikTok, in your post-match sort of analysis of the game or reaction to the game, was Giovanni Lo Celso. That was his 100th appearance for Tottenham. what did you make of his cameo, and where does his future lie? Because he's another player that I almost forget plays for us because we see him so rarely. And when he plays for us, you're thinking, "Oh my God, he's quality. He's so good," and he has that different dynamic.
Yeah.
What do you make of his? Yeah, what do you make of his cameo, and where do you think his future lies?
Well, you say like you kind of forget that he plays for Tottenham. I text you, and I was chatting to like people in the pub when the team news came out. It's like that's probably the strongest bench that Spurs have ever had.
Yeah.
That one on Saturday, and the fact that Lo Celso was part of that show, and the fact that he was trusted to come on at 1-1 and make that difference, because we've seen it in glimpses again with Lo Celso this season. It's just a fitness thing. He's just never consistently fit enough to start games or come off the bench for Spurs. But in that run of games that he did have, he was incredible for Tottenham. He can be a real asset to this team, and we saw that on Saturday with his defensive work. What I've always been impressed with about Lo Celso, again, I think he's one of those players that has suffered from kind of a bit of a misprofiling because of the time that he was brought in when Eriksen was seemingly on the way out, and we brought in Ndombele and Lo Celso. It was almost like Lo Celso was going to be that number 10 to replace Eriksen. He's never really been that. He can affect the games high up the pitch. We've seen that this season with the goals against Aston Villa and Man City. He has got an eye for a really good pass as well. He's got composure in the final third. But I actually think what he does is add that little bit more industry. There was a really key moment towards the end of the game where Luton had us kind of hemmed in from a corner, and it just takes the pressure off. Like in his own box, he was able to kind of steer the ship, get the ball out and play it up the line under pressure. And I thought he just added that little bit of tempo. He likes to touch and then go. He was involved in the move. He played that cross across the box for Johnson where it nearly went over the line. He was just he was a really, really important reason as to why Spurs turned that game around. I thought Maddison was growing into the game. I think it was a little bit like Palace, where Maddison was poor in the first half, or not poor necessarily, but not able to impact the game as much. And then he was sort of starting to grow into it, and then he got taken off. But for Lo Celso to come on, and he's obviously hungry, he wants to come on and make an impact, and he did that. And I just thought he sped the game up a little bit for Spurs. He just likes to have a touch from it, give it, go, move the ball, consistently move the ball, and that's how you're going to break teams like that down. And I thought Lo Celso, I thought he was very good. Him alongside Bentancur as well, I thought was really good as well when he came on. Just totally different dynamic in that midfield. I thought they were both superb, but I thought Lo Celso really stood out and helped us to win the game. In terms of his future, it's a tricky one, because if you're talking about would you sign Conor Gallagher or keep Lo Celso, I'd probably want to keep Lo Celso. But I just think in terms of the money that we can bring in, and then it's a homegrown player coming the other way, I think from a business point of view, that's maybe the way that Spurs will look at it. But I would, if Lo Celso is still at Spurs next season, I would not have a problem with that at all. I think he can be, if he can stay fit, which is the big if, as it's been the case for his whole Spurs career, then I think he can have a big impact on what Spurs do next season, especially with European football as well.
Yeah. It's a tough one because about his future. I mean, he was unbelievable when he came on against Luton, and he did make a big impact. But it is a tough one with Lo Celso because this season, every time we've seen him, he's been unreal. He's been so good, and just like you said, adds that different dynamic. But you want a player to be fully fit all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you're not fit, you're not it. Do you know what I mean? And with Lo Celso, he is such a selling asset. You'll be able to get 25, maybe even 30 off the back of his performances this season, euros for 30 mil euros off of Barcelona or a Spanish team, because they love him out there. There's such a collection of teams that want to sign him. And he will generate a lot of interest, and he will be a selling asset. And obviously, after this year, he'll have one more year in his contract. No, is that true? Is it 2025?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's out of contract next summer.
Yeah, so that is a problem, because do you sign a new contract with him? But the thing is, he's flourishing, and in this system, it really, really benefits his abilities and his strongest facets, and you can see that he's relishing not even on the pitch, but in his personality. He seems a lot more settled. He's best mates with Romero. He's making jokes in the dressing room. You never saw that before. He almost seemed like a bit of an outsider, a bit of he looked a bit antisocial, and every time he came across in those in interviews or in those training videos. But this season he looks like one of the boys. Do you know what I mean? So it would be sad to see him go. It's just, I just think he's never really fit, and if you're gonna get 30 mil for him this season, you will, instead of losing him on a free, because I don't think we'd sign a good contract with him. But 100 appearances for Spurs in hindsight is good at Lo Celso, because you never thought that last season. You never thought that the season before. But we've sort of drained that bit of value out of him because he was a big signing at the time.
Yeah.
But it's a tricky one. I think I probably would. Well, we'll put a poll out after this episode, and people can vote because I'm really interested to see where people lie on it.
Yeah. I think it's a good point that you sort of touched on as well with his kind of personality, because I remember there was an article, I think in The Athletic, at some point last season maybe, when he was out on loan, talking about the fact that he actually wasn't particularly well liked within the dressing room. He was a little bit spiky, a little bit, like you said, antisocial, but you've seen in it, and especially on the pitch as well, like he's, and the way he is off the pitch as well, like he's just got a bit of a smile on his face and just playing like he wants to be there. Like there's been a noticeable difference with Lo Celso, a noticeable difference with him this season.
100%.
It's great because I just remember, I can always think back to that run under Mourinho just after Christmas, where he sort of came into the team and it was like, fuck me, this guy's amazing. Like he stood out like a sore thumb in that team, and he was great. And I think we have still seen that player in glimpses this season. So I would keep him. I would keep him. It's just about whether what Spurs plan to do in midfield, which I think I saw some things yesterday saying that they do, if there's an upgrade for the 6th position, they might look at it, which then is interesting because someone probably has to make way. Obviously, Højbjerg will probably be going in the summer, so he will go. But then it's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. Yeah, I reckon he's a part of a few of midfielders where you're thinking they might actually cash in on them. I'm thinking,
their future's not certain.
So Skip, players that just aren't that when they play, they're solid players for us. But you're just thinking you need players that are going to be that the standards aren't going to drop when they come on. But Lo Celso isn't that.
Was Skip on the bench on Saturday? Sorry, was Skip on the bench on Saturday?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know.
Look it up. I'll have a look. Because I was just thinking again, like that just speaks to the depth that we have got in those positions.
Exactly.
The fact that he can't get even on the bench.
Yeah, and you're thinking about next year, obviously, with Lucas Bergvall coming in, maybe Alfie Devine. I don't know if he's ready yet, but maybe he'll get a Premier League loan. But you're going to have players that coming in and are going to want to play. And if you still have players like Lo Celso, players like Skip, obviously, I don't think we're expecting Højbjerg to go, but it's going to be a problem because there's so many other players in line to just come in and do a job. But Lo Celso, full credit to him on Saturday because he was unbelievable. But I don't know.
He wasn't on the bench, by the way.
He wasn't. I think that speaks volumes because he was another player that last year, when he wasn't playing, he was saying he was willing to go out on loan again. I don't think another loan's going to suit Skip. I think the only reason he's still at Spurs is because he's homegrown and home trained, which will be hard to replace. But again, he needs to go for his own sake. He needs to go on and join a lower league team and so get that recognition because when he's at his best, Skip, he's not far off an England call-up, I don't think. Especially in that sort of 6th position that England sort of lack. I mean, who knows? But he's just not cutting it at the moment, and he's just going further down the pecking order. So it'd be interesting to see what happens to Skip, Lo Celso, because they're not really touted for a move away. But Højbjerg looks like he's set to leave, and that number 6 comes in.
Yeah,
we've got back-to-back games. We've got West Ham tomorrow night, so games are coming thick and fast. West Ham lost to Newcastle through a late goal, which is ironic because on the same day we beat Luton with a late goal. Does that give us the psychological edge in this game, or do you think West Ham are going to have that bit of grip between their teeth and they're going to play out their skins in response to that late defeat against Newcastle?
Well, they always turn up against us, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
They
exactly.
always do.
Yeah.
I just could not believe what I was watching on Saturday because I went to the Beehive for Sam Cornish's event. Shout out Sam, absolute legend. And we was watching the game in the pub. 3-1. West Ham were so in control of that game; it was unbelievable. Newcastle missed a couple of chances towards the end, and then me and my old man left the pub. And then by the time I got in the ground at the bar, it was 4-3. I could not believe it. I could not believe what had happened. It's like they had a man sent off or something. But it was honestly bizarre. But you just know that when West Ham play us, it's just different, isn't it? They just turn up all the time. I hate going and playing there. I know we've won quite a fair few games there, but there's just something about it. So I think we will definitely see a response because that's kind of David Moyes. That's what he does. He's able to kind of, from what is the outside perception of the media, kind of save his job in these moments where the West Ham fans are pillaring him, and then he goes and pulls a result out that he didn't necessarily expect. And especially if they will be fuming about that on Saturday, West Ham, because they were so in control of the game, so much quality with Paqueta and Kudus, who I'm worried about. Which I think is obviously great that Van der Ven's back, because we need to go there with our strongest back line.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. Also, the fact that we're not really talking about Dragusin as well, just to touch on him, shows that he had a pretty decent game, I thought, on Saturday. Yeah. But Van der Ven, to have him back is big. But they will definitely see a response from West Ham. We just always do. We're not going to go there and turn them over. I think we might win, but I can't see us going there and piling on the misery necessarily that off the back of their result on Saturday. It's just going to be one of those horrible games, I think, tomorrow.
Yeah, you just can see Mikel Antonio scoring a goal, can't you? Like he always does. He always plays like his best game of the season against Spurs. I mean, we're lucky we don't have Eric Dyer in defence, because it looks like whenever Antonio wheels away, Dyer's always in the background looking miserable. So do you know what I mean? Like every single photo, it's Dyer with his hands in the air. So obviously he's facing up against a much stronger back line, but it's one of those games where you look at West Ham, and obviously they're going to be at home. The West Ham are going to be going mental for a victory, and the atmosphere is going to be so hostile. Obviously off such a bad defeat, but I think it doesn't really matter about the defeat. I think if they won that game against Newcastle, they just come out playing the same, because they're either going to have a bit of grip between their teeth, or they're going to be confident. And that's why I kind of thought maybe a bit of a stale draw would have been best for Spurs, I think, because either way you're going to see a reaction now from West Ham. I just think the way West Ham set up under David Moyes, it is probably, the way we set up is probably perfect for the way West Ham set up. If you're looking from a West Ham fan's point of view, the way that they can hit us on transitions, and if I were West Ham, I'd probably double up with Kudus and Paquetá on Bissouma, or try and overload that midfield, because on transitions, that's our weak point at the moment. That's our vulnerability. That's where it lies. And West Ham are so good on attacking transitions. And like you said, Van der Ven will be integral to the way we defend against them, because that recovery place is going to be needed, and that awareness and intensity at the back is going to be needed. But we really need to be at the top of our game. When we did play against West Ham earlier this season, we were really unlucky. We absolutely dominated that first half, and we were the architects of our own downfall. Obviously with a doggy mistake, and what other mistake was it? It was that weird goal
against West Ham.
It was that weird goal where it
deflected off. Romero blocked it, and it just fell straight to Bowen. Yeah, it was unlucky. I think it was Romero.
Yeah, but
the second goal was so
they didn't
avoidable.
have anything. Yeah, and apart from that, they didn't have anything. And you're looking at the way we played in the first half, total domination. It's just we were quite blunt up front. We didn't really have that sharpness and ruthlessness up front to sort of just take a shot and just test Areola in goal, because we totally dominated them with possession. But again, sort of suits West Ham, because they can sort of just keep that low block, keep that physicality, and then hit us and pepper us on the counter-attack and in set pieces, which is a big worry as well, because that's our vulnerability. So their two strengths.
There was a couple of them on Saturday. Yeah, there was a couple of them on Saturday. There was one in the first half where it just turned around to the bloke next to me and was like, we cannot defend set. But there was one header that went wide, and it was like, just didn't pick the bloke up. I can't remember who it was for Luton, but I was thinking while you were talking then, I was thinking the same thing. We just that's going to be a real worry. You think about how many goals they can score, the height they've got. Someone like Souček, you can definitely see kind of, I'm not looking forward to that.
So, to be fair, mate, I'm not. I've actually got quite a bad feeling about it. Off the back of a Luton win, I feel like we might even drop our standards. You saw when we smashed Aston Villa, our standards dropped going into Fulham, thinking we were like dog's bollocks. And then obviously West Ham have got something to prove after that Newcastle game. So it will be such a difficult game, and I'm actually dreading it, because West Ham. Yeah,
I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, they just, like you said, they always turn up, and David Moyes will save his job. But who do you think will be our most important player in this game? Do you reckon?
I think it's kind of what you touched on there with Bissouma. I think it's whoever plays in that number 6 position, because I thought Bissouma was really poor again on Saturday. Again, grew into the game a little bit in the second half, but just not good enough, sloppy, lazy for that first goal, gets beaten too easily. And I think in a game like this where West Ham with that kind of midfield of Souček and Paquetá, who, even though Paquetá's not that kind of guy that's going to keep going and winning the ball back, he's just going to be buzzing around all the time. He's such a nuisance and so much quality as well. If you give him that space and you're not disciplined enough to kind of stay with him, and then you've got Souček who will just eat up the ground.
Yeah,
it's going to be really difficult for whoever plays there. I would personally probably go for Bentancur. I just think Basuma in these games at the moment just isn't having that same. It's such a difficult one because off the back of the Villa game where he was so good in that big game, you kind of going into this one thinking you could see a similar performance. I remember Basuma, it was his debut for Spurs last season against West Ham away earlier on in the season. He was really poor, and I think it's maybe just not the game for him. So I'd probably put Bentancur in there with Sarr, but I think they're going to have to play as more of a double pivot rather than Bentancur as the sitter and Sarr playing a little bit further forward. So I'd probably say one of those two. But I'd also probably go for Richarlison. I think Richarlison might play through the middle on tomorrow because obviously he only gave him a few minutes towards the end of the game. Game's coming in quick rotation. Obviously, we've had a game move forward to Sunday against Forest, so there's not as much of a break in between games. So he's going to want to kind of rest that a little bit, that front three, make some changes maybe. I think he might put Sonny back out wide and Richie through the middle. And I think with that, deeper block they're going to want to play in and having that kind of box present striker in Richarlison and having Johnson able to supplement him with crosses out wide. If he does start, then I'd say maybe Richarlison as well. I feel like he could go and win us that game. So I'd probably say Richie or Bentancur and Sarr together because I think they kind of come as a package in this game if they both start.
Yeah, I agree, mate. I agree. I think also Van der Ven as well. If he is back, I think he'll be integral. And Romero. Romero had a really good game against West Ham in the opposite fixture this season. He scored as well from a set piece. So I think the players you've named, 100%. I do think we need to be a little bit more pragmatic, which I don't think we will be, but I feel like we do need to be a bit concerned about that, about them overloading that number 6 position. And Van der Ven's recovery pace is going to be needed because you actually saw in the Antonio goal against Newcastle, you're worried. Paquetá can spot a pass and his vision is great, and the execution of the pass is perfect. It was perfectly weighted to Antonio, just timed his run, and bang, Newcastle was stunned. But with Van der Ven there, I don't think that happens. So.
No.
He will be integral. But yeah, Kudus, we need to be dirty in this game as well. Like we need to rile up that West Ham fan base because Kudus is so good at progressing the ball. He's so effective at winning the ball and just progressing it forward. And we need to just be bang on him and stop and be ruthless and not be passive in our defending in transition. So we need to up that sort of gear. You know how at half time we upped our gear in attack. We need to up our gear every game with the way we defend transition. So I agree. Yeah. Sar's going to be really important in marking Kudus, I think, and Van der Ven. And I would start Bentancur as well because I don't want to talk about Basuma again. But again, I think if you're going to pick weaknesses, I mean, he was one against Luton, and he was very passive again in transition and in stopping crosses. So yeah, I'd start Bentancur. And Bentancur was deployed as a 8 as well, wasn't he? Against Luton, so which was interesting because I think that's where his future definitely lies over that 6th position. But he can play 6, and I think it's time for him to just start playing 6 whilst whilst Basuma sort of has a little bit of time out. I think. On to the Q&A then from last week. Actually, we got a really important question from Holly Hotspurs. She was asking who we think our most underrated player this season has been. And I think it was a really interesting topic because I think a lot of the Spurs players are getting the spotlight they deserve. And it's kind of hard to decide who that most undervalued player is or underappreciated and underrated player is in the Spurs system. Do you have any picks?
I think it's really tough for the most underrated because I think there's underrated in terms of what underrated within the Spurs fan base and underrated generally. Because I'd say underrated generally is Romero. I just don't think he gets anywhere near the plaudits he deserves. But we've kind of been over that ground like so many times. But for Spurs, I think again, Sarr is another one you could chuck in with that in terms of the wider kind of football media like landscape, I guess, and other rival fans and stuff like that. Underrated within Spurs. I don't know. Such a tough one. It's such a tough one. Maybe it is Brennan Johnson, but I feel like maybe he is starting to get the plaudits he deserves right now. It's tough to say that. I don't know who. I'm struggling with that. Who would you say? Because
think there's
I just think I kind of rate everyone.
Yeah, that's it. We've got so many, and it's a sign of how good our business has been over the last few windows. But considering our team's so young as well, our team's so young, and think of the potential that they could reach, and their ceiling's sort of unlimited. I think for a lot of the players, but I think underrated in the sense that they don't get the plaudits they deserve. I think is three players. I think the fullbacks, Porro and Udogie and Sarr, because
Yeah.
you sort of it's sometimes when you're in a system that is playing well, is doing well and thriving, the player that you almost don't notice is almost your most important player because they're not making
Yeah.
mistakes. They're not making mistakes. I think that's Sarr. Sarr, you never look at him and be like, oh, that's such a bad mistake. They've absolutely capitalised on us. He's always doing the dirty work. He's always covering the ground, and he is effective in that in penetrating the box and his movement around the area, and in build-up play. He's so good at progressing the ball. His passing and his technique is getting so much better. So I think it probably would be for me, Pat Matt Sarr, but Porro and Udogie, they just do their business and they're solid 8 to 9 out of 10 every single week. And I know Udogi's made a few mistakes, but again, he's 21 years old, 20 to 21, which is ridiculous. His capabilities at that young age and his potential is unknown territory. Is his potential. Porro is a joke, and I know he didn't have that much of an effect in the first half, but the second half he was class, absolute class. And I just think he doesn't really the fullbacks just don't really get. You almost expect them to be that good, and when you're expecting it, and they go under the radar. That's when they're undervalued, I think, or underappreciated. Well, not underappreciated because we definitely praise them all the time. They get a lot of love, but just in this system, how vital they are, that I think they are underrated. But it was a good question.
For sure.
Lastly, before we finish up, what do you think the score prediction is going to be for the West Ham game?
I'm not like you. I don't feel great about it. I think my head is saying 1-1, a bit like last season. But I'm gonna always got to be optimistic. I'm gonna go for 2-1 Spurs. But
2-1.
I think this will be quite tricky. Yeah, and I think it could end up being 1-1. But I'm gonna go for 2-1. I'm gonna go for Richie to get on the score sheet and Sonny.
Sonny, okay, yeah, nice. It's a night game, isn't it? It's at night.
It just doesn't feel
at the
great.
London Stadium, like
8:15 kickoff. Like, what's that all about? Like,
is it 8:15?
Nonsense.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. What's the point?
Yeah.
And I just think
play it tomorrow. Play on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, just do that. It's easier for everyone else. But yeah, I just think I haven't got a good feeling about it at all. But I don't want to say a draw. I want to say Spurs win. So I'm going to say 2-0 Spurs or 3-1. I think I don't actually believe that. I'm not being funny. I actually don't believe that. I think it will be like you say, maybe 1-1, maybe 2-2. 3-2 Spurs. 3-2 Spurs. I'm going to go. I think they'll get a couple, but I feel like I don't know. I'm not feeling good, but I think we need to win, so I'm going to say 3-2 Spurs.
There's been so many times as well when we've gone there, like been comfortably 3-0 up or whatever, and then nearly thrown it away as well. So even if we do go like 2 goals in front, 3 goals in front, we've had it so many times. We've been 3-0 up there, and then they've got it back to 3-2. Like that wouldn't surprise me either.
I agree. It's just such a bogey fixture, and it's such a horrid game going to, like, even when we were going to the Bowling Ground, and just horrible. But actually, it's funny you say this really quick. Last Saturday, obviously there's no club football. It was like I was time travelling and watching so I watched the game from 2007 or 2008 season. We had Berbatov and Defoe up front. It was the game where West Ham kept getting ahead, and then we scored 2 late goals.
The 4-3,
yeah. And it was that, and I was loving it. I was watching this game thinking the quality of football has gone up so much in the last 15 years. Ridiculous. But there's still players that I only got a glimpse of, like Defoe, Berbatov. I only really got a glimpse of them to watch them again. Almost like not really knowing what the score was going to be until I realised, hang on, this is that game. But
that Berbatov free kick, mate, honestly, ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. And even like Carlos Tevez, seeing players like that just like ball out. It was actually really fun to watch. I watched that in the international break. But yeah, let's hope for the same. We go there and we come away with 3 points. Where can people find you, mate?
You can find me on TikTok. You can search my name or Ben Talks Football on there. That's where you'll be able to find me. Twitter, the same. You can hear me sometimes on the Fighting Cock and the Lab as well, the new podcast by the Fighting Cock. You can hear me over there. We're going to record an episode actually about Dejan Kulusevski today, so
Nice.
make sure you go and listen to that. And yeah, it's pretty much everywhere.
Quality.
Obviously follow us on everywhere.
Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow on Spotify and Apple Podcast. And we'd really like to hear what you think of the pod. So yeah, get those comments in. How you finding it? Maybe what conversations you want to hear from us, because we're open to suggestions.
Yeah.
And we're loving the sport so far. So thank you so much. And up the Spurs. Let's get those 3 points.
Up the Spurs. Coys. Up the Spurs. 3 Spurs. Fuck West Ham.